This winter, Shady Ladies Tours is launching a third tour at the Metropolitan Museum called Scandalous Seductions. This is a tour about the intersection between art, sex, and scandal. And like all of our tours, it takes you throughout the museum to a number of different galleries. We start, as we always do, in the ancient Greek galleries, and in this case, we go all the way up to a living painter. In some senses, the tour centers on a very famous painting. Many people have told me that it's their favorite painting in the museum, John Singer Sargent's Madame X. It's an intriguing painting because for us today it looks like just a wonderful portrait, but at the time it was seen as incredibly shocking. Indeed, it almost destroyed John Singer Sargent's career. And as we examine it, we'll show you why it was seen as so shocking when it was first displayed. But it's also, for us, the basis of a theory. And that theory is that artists in almost every culture frequently play with sexual taboos. They're making artworks that are as shocking as they think they can get away with. It's kind of a game they play with the audience. And once in a while, an artist messes up. And this is a very good example. His painting, I think he expected to have what we call a succès de scandale, a scandalous success. But unfortunately, what he got was a scandale. And there are other examples of that in the museum as well. But most of the paintings, instead, the artworks, were instead successful. They were as risque as they could get away with being in their culture. And that's probably the bulk of what this tour is about. So we show you things all the way from ancient Greece, where we'll see mythical figures masturbating, which the Greeks considered low and disgraceful, all the way up to a 20th century painting of which I think would make anyone in our culture quite uncomfortable if they looked at it carefully. It references very clearly the heated sexual desires of a preteen or teenage girl. And, we are so uncomfortable with teenage sexuality. It really confronts you with the reality that we generally don't look at. So it's quite a scandalous painting, and indeed has been the subject of protests. In between, we see all kinds of other things. I think maybe the thing that surprises most people is that we spend a lot of time in the Dutch galleries, looking at paintings from the so-called golden age of Dutch painting in the 16th and 17th century. And I think we mostly imagine that period as not very sexy, perhaps because there aren't very many nudes in Dutch painting, but also I think because our view of Dutch painting focuses on Rembrandt. And of course, the center of Rembrandt's work is the portrait. And what's interesting about his portraits is their psychological accuracy. And as a result, we ignore the fact that all around him there were painters painting quite sexy scenes, which they got away with because they were seen as scenes of moral warning. But when you look at them, you have to say they're a lot of fun, and the moral warning is sprinkled on very lightly in many cases. And we'll see several examples, including a wonderful painting by Jan Steen of a party scene, perhaps in a tavern, where the wife, or at least the woman at the center of the painting, is either having or on the verge of having an affair with a young musician on whose thigh she's leaning. So yeah, that's a great example of the kind of painting that we'll show you on the tour. And I think, as with all of our tours, our point is to show you that the museum, or that art, in fact, is more fun than art historians, museums, school teachers, and most tours would lead you to believe, because we've been sold a view of art that is all about aesthetics and ideals. But in fact, really probably the number one subject of art is sexuality. So come on our tours and you'll find out more about it. And you can find information about them at shadyladies.tours.com. We hope to see you soon.